Hello, everyone, and welcome to our YouTube channel. We are the Good Doctors of Abbey Research. I'm Dr. Kristen.
I'm Dr. Erin.
And we are embarking on one of our fictionalized cultural months that we just made up. We've done this with, I don't know, we did this with Indian Subcontinent Cultural Month.
We made Indian Subcontinent Cultural Month, correct. Yeah.
We'll be doing it again because there are lots of cultural months, but they don't cover the breadth of the cultures that we would like to experience and that we would like to make sure that you experience. Because while America is not a melting pot, it is definitely very likely that you will run into any number of these cultures at any point in time in your life. And the one we're focusing on for the month of December is Denmark. This may seem exceptionally random to you, and I respect that, because Denmark appears to a lot of people to be a very random country. However, I am 50% Danish.
Woo!
And
not so random.
Not so random. And my last name is Nielsen, which is an insanely popular surname in Denmark. And I grew up being certainly not like inundated to the point where we spoke the language, which saddens me because I really wish I had learned Danish at a young age because it is hard to pick up. But we were very connected with our Danish relatives. I got college scholarships from the Danish Sisterhood to go to college. My grandmother was very active in the Danish Sisterhood, and kind of what it meant in my family was to be stubborn, hardworking, and Protestant. And so that is in all my times in Denmark, if you add sporty into that, that's kind of the vibe.
I was about to say, that's the same. What an irony that it's the same vibe of our first film.
My family comes from just outside of Copenhagen in a really, really lovely little village called Humlebach, which is on the train line to Copenhagen. So I've had the privilege of spending some time with my family in person. Last summer, got to take my dad back and show him the house that his grandmother was born in, and kind of what that meant. And my dad considers himself a second generation immigrant because his grandmother emigrated while she was, I think like 9 or 10, I can't quite remember. But he's had a very, it's hard to kind of have, like, we don't have a kind of identity as immigrants or in the diaspora the same way that the Irish or the Italians do. So grasping Danish culture has been a little bit harder for us growing up. But there's a couple traditions we did. There's some food I really love that we will get into because we're going to be doing a food documentary later on in this show. So we're going to talk a little bit more about how much I love dill. But also some really fun Christmas traditions that we'll get into in a couple more videos, and some ways that Scandinavia was very much part of my childhood growing up, and is a big part of my life now, even though I married an Irishman. So another big part of my life is sports. And this is not because I am Danish, although my brother has a whole convoluted joke now that's why we are, and why we're also very good at losing, because we're half Scottish as well. So we're... And then we grew up in Philadelphia, so we are well disposed to being losers in terms of our teams. But when Dr. Erin asked me to find 4 films on Denmark, this one had been banging around Netflix lists for a little while, and I've been meaning to watch it because there's not a whole lot of things I know about Denmark, like I said, but I sure as hell know we won the European Championship in 1992.
That's amazing. I love it.
Absolutely no. And I know that a part of getting there was beating England. So
and France and Germany. Whoa!
And as an American, what's really the Netherlands match is the one that my cousins still talk about.
Yeah.
So, and they remember watching it.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah. So the 90s were a really big, fun era of European football, by the way, because a lot of the money hadn't entered yet. So we didn't have a lot of super teams. You definitely had people that were getting paid. These guys weren't amateurs. But like even the guy who played for Manchester United, his salary is like what the ball boys make now. So it was a whole lot more about pride and like scrappiness and a lot more and about ill-fitting uniforms than it is as we get farther into the 2000s. So a lot of my European family and friends that really love football really talk nostalgically about the football of the 80s and the 90s because it was just a little bit more fun. And it was not about sponsorships or kind of the other stuff that happens now. So the first film up is Summer of '92, which is, I think, and I'm going to let Dr. Erin kind of explain a little bit more. But I think it's a really good starter because it's the most, like, all sports movies are exactly the same. And you've seen this one 400 times, even though you've never heard the Danish language before. So basically the thing is the Danish football team had been all style for a long time. They were really fun to watch. They had a whole lot of charismatic dudes on it. It was really, really fun.
No substance.
But we just didn't really win things. That was kind of lame. And we have some other sports that, like, people were kind of really into. And so football wasn't a big deal. Denmark's a fairly small nation as it goes. And so, and a lot of people don't, like, leisure is very important and being physical is very important, but being professionally physical necessarily isn't as big of a cultural value as it is in some other places. And so, but like pride is huge. Danish pride is massive. And so, like, it was rubbing everyone the wrong way that they had won. And in typical underdog sports fashion, I think this is like the script writers of the universe write this stuff. The guy who got us there was the guy everybody thought would never, ever get us there, and et cetera, et cetera. So this is the very true to life, like, it's pretty chronological, true story of how the Danish national team won the European Championships in 1992.
Yeah, and it was remarkable to me, like, one of the early notes that I wrote was, this is like the miracle of Danish football movies. For those of you that have seen the movie Miracle, or know what the Miracle on Ice is, when the U.S. Olympic team won the gold medal in ice hockey in 1980, beating the unbeatable Russian team. So it's a very, like, I have seen this film before, just in English. But it was really, like, for me, even they were so much more of an underdog because they didn't even qualify for the tournament. Like, at least the American hockey team, like, won a few games to get to, like.
Yeah, no, we blew it. The only reason we were in it was because Yugoslavia was politically gross and got sanctioned.
I loved that. And they got like 10 days to prep. They'd all been on their summer halls, and like everyone else had been playing. And like, I appreciated watching this movie now because I didn't realize that the European Championship was such a big deal. I am not a huge football / soccer fan, although I watched like all the World Cups growing up because I love like national tournaments and that kind of.
We watched the U.S. women win the World Cup together in 2015 in my living room, which was really special.
Yeah. So I don't have as long a connection with football as Dr. Kristen does, but I've been a fan of the sport for a while. But living in Northern Ireland and watching the Euros was really, really fun. I
love the Euros. I love them more than the World Cup.
I do. I love the Euros more than the World Cup too. So it was really fun to kind of watch this back and be like, I love the European Championships. Yeah, I mean, this is the classic underdog story. You really can't write it any more classically underdog. And the fact that like Rickard Nielsen was the 8th choice for coach. And like they had to stay in this dinky hotel, and it's like all the stuff that if you didn't know it was history, you'd be like, you're just making this up for the sake of storytelling, which is really quite remarkable that they had that terrible of a journey to this moment. But yeah, for me, what I loved and what I wrote was the universality of sports movies. And as we'll probably, likely, I would imagine for a lot of our other cultural months, find some kind of sport-related film because they're such great entry points. There's a universality of them, the human experience that we can relate to, even when things aren't in our language, or it's like, and we talked about in our Indian Culture Month, Beyond All Boundaries, I think it was called.
The cricket one. Yeah.
The cricket film. Documentary. So like you don't have to know a lot about cricket to care about that film and to care about those people. You don't have to know a lot about football to care about these people in this film. But you get a lot of the human experience. And I didn't see all of the things that were uniquely Danish, which Dr. Kristen can talk about too, which was fun when we were just talking about it offline. But like the last note I wrote for this was like, even without the subtitles, I would have known exactly what the story was in this movie. And that's a powerful thing because, you can argue that like European sports are maybe more well-known and easier to understand than others, but like, no, like we can all relatively understand and relate to some of those things happening. And then some of the other stories that were playing out in the movie, particularly the storyline with Kim Vilfort and his daughter, who was very sick with cancer. Like, I didn't need subtitles to know she was dying. And like a lot of that comes across in a way that humanizes people. But I loved, like, it was really funny and dry wit.
That's the Danes. We are a
that.
sarcastic bunch.
Yeah. It was just, everybody just watch this movie. That's all I've got to say, really. I loved so many parts of it. Rickard Nielsen is like my hero now. His story about the history of curling.
Loved it so much. I know.
His team to his mom's corset. Like, he was just
Sure.
an aw duck.
Yeah.
And I think one of the best lines in the film, really, for sports movies, full stop, was when his assistant coach, who was smoking a pipe
the whole time. I just loved it so much.
In McDonald's. It was the best thing ever.
In the hotel hallway. This is a man who smokes a pipe in the shower, I can guarantee you. Like,
so they're sitting in the stand smoking a pipe, and he says, I can't get them to work. Like, they're not working. I can't get them to work. And he says, you're a great coach. You're probably the best coach I've ever worked with, but you're a terrible leader. And you've got an entire field full of great players out there, but you don't have a team. And like, that is every underdog sports moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I flashed to Miracle, and when they lose to, I want to say some Swedish, like the Swedes or the Netherlands, I don't know.
I mean, it happened to Mighty Ducks as well.
It happened to Mighty Ducks, and you have to have that moment where you help the team become a team.
Remember the Titans? Yeah, everybody. And that's the thing. Like, if you live in the UK, which we always recommend people do at some point in their lives, you will learn that there is not many love stories as deep and true as England and their national football team.
Correct.
That defies all logic.
Especially since they haven't won since 1966.
However, the story of the English football team, the entire time I have been sentient, is that it is a team full of the best players on the planet that cannot function as a team.
That are not a team. Yeah, 100%. And they've had the Wayne Rooneys and the David Beckhams, and it's just not
Peter Crouch and yeah.
Yeah, Crouch.
And Frank Lampard. If you cannot win, different.
Anyway, we digress from naming English footballers. But yeah, I think that's all that I wanted to say. I loved how flashy in early 90s the footballers were, and like the montage where they all rock in with their super, like, wearing scarves and slow-mo walking. And I was like, yes, I didn't know I needed this. Thank you. In 2020, it was just chef's kiss. But I don't know if you have anything to add to my like gushingness, or if you want to talk about any specifically Danish things that happened.
No, I mean, like, it just felt like I was watching. I mean, honestly, like, we've talked about this with Ireland with you a couple of times, where it's like, oh, that could be my uncle. The very, like, so my uncle was a ship captain for Maersk. My second cousin, like, whatever, I call him Uncle Hugo. He was a ship captain for Maersk for years. And the first time I went to his house, he asked me if I wanted to see his passport with all the stamps. And I was like, I'd love to. Dude pulled out a pile of passports about that thick because he went through a passport every 3 months.
Oh my God.
For most of the 80s, because there weren't, like, every time he went anywhere, he had to get a passport.
Yeah.
Stamp. And he like sailed to Madagascar and stuff like that. And very calmly, he's telling me stories about like the time he met so-and-so and the whatever. And like, and then his wife, who is one of my favorite humans, is just very calmly looking at him and being like, you are not a big deal. Like, that's what her face is saying. Like, you are not a big deal. Danish wives have no time for your ego or nonsense. His wife was so perfect. Like, when
I loved that like he's tearing down the kitchen and she just puts the like groceries into the cabinet that he's torn down, and she's like, no time for your nonsense.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a very sporty country. Everybody rides bikes everywhere. Like, it is not a sentient culture. Especially because just in geography wise, the other Scandinavian countries touch the north, like the Arctic Circle, and Denmark doesn't. So we have a little bit more of we're much more fishing centric economy than Norway. Norway definitely has fishing, but Norway also has oil, stuff like that. And we are much more compact. You can get across Denmark in a day if you need to. You cannot do that with Norway at all. So Denmark, like we gave you Legos, by the way. So you're welcome.
Like, I always draw it like more connected to like the Netherlands. And like,
so it's physically on top of Germany.
Right. Okay. But I just meant in terms of like being quasi like Nordic, but more like inland kind of.
Ish. I don't know. I mean, I might not know the Netherlands as well. I would say there's too much French in the Netherlands for me to see emotional connection there. I love the orderliness of Copenhagen. Like when you're there, it may feel chaotic because there are 4 million bikes everywhere, but like everybody behaves themselves. And Copenhagen is one of my favorite cities on the planet. And I have many times considered moving to Denmark, but they would make me surrender my American citizenship, which would get a little bit rough with like trying to get back in and hang out with family. There's also the fact that I'm terrible at languages, but I spoke at a conference at University of Copenhagen a couple of years ago, and it was like the most fun I've ever had. I loved that conference. They just are very no nonsense. And I love it. I love it so much. They also absolutely, like the Scandinavian countries all kind of hate each other in a loving and joking manner. But everybody eats the same things. The languages all sound the same. Everybody hates the Danes because we conquered everyone.
No.
Yeah, sorry, we're the Vikings.
Nobody likes colonizers. Like
there's some Danish in my husband's blood because his part of Ireland ended up having he's actually, he's got Spanish and Danish in his blood. Because of the Armada and the colonizers and the Vikings that came through and were in his particular part of Ireland, especially.
Yeah, same. I have Iberian genes from Ireland, from the west coast of Ireland. So
yeah, and they like came in from Derry and down to Dublin, and you have to go.
The craziest like shipwrecks of the Spanish Armada happened outside Derry. Like things I did not know.
Yeah. And so to get from where the Spanish Armada shipwrecked to then where you leave the island again, which is Dublin, you have to pass right through my husband's people's home place. Yeah. So they stopped along the way and procreated a few times, evidently.
As they were wont to do.
So no, it felt really like lived in and authentic. It's like I say about other countries, this is too, but like it's 2020 in Denmark too. It was 1992 in Denmark too. That yes, they wore all the terrible clothes that we wore.
Yeah. It was, it was a very universal kind of, oh yeah, I understand everything that's happening. And I think sometimes we think different cultures are so different that they're not relatable. And that
I've yet to be in one that's not
exactly. And that's why we like to do these Heritage and History Months, whether we make them up or they're actually sanctioned U.S. government history months, because it always gives us the opportunity and gives everyone else, hopefully, if you watch our recommendations, to go, oh yeah, that totally makes sense to me. That's totally relatable. And also, I don't understand. Although their love of McDonald's is something I will 100% understand, because y'all do not know European
McDonald's
is the best. And like we were just talking about it offline, and like my kingdom for an
Irish McDonald's right now. Yep.
Especially in Ireland, because it's like Irish beef and Irish potatoes, and it has traveled
an Irish cheddar
2 miles from like where the cow was to the McDonald's. So good.
Okay, I'm having like an emotionally difficult time continuing this conversation.
I know. I think we should stop for now.
We should stop. But we're going to be talking also, one of the things that is distinctly Danish and Scandinavian is the concept of hygge, which is spelled Hygge, and made kind of a big splash into the Western culture a couple of years ago. Danish Christmas decorating is really big in America right now, I've noticed.
Yeah.
Things I had in my house forever. But anyway, so we're going to talk about hygge. We're going to talk about food. We're going to talk a little bit more about history. We're going to talk as much as we can. I'm also reading some books that I will be bringing up in these videos. There's a couple really short ones. But one of the best ways in English language to get to know Denmark is actually to read our cookbooks and to read our travel guides. And so I'll be recommending those in the next little bit. The Danes are fiercely proud of the Danish language, and though absolutely everybody speaks English, they don't like doing it. And I have a lot of respect for that, even though I wish they would, because I'd like to know my history a little bit better, but that's okay. But it's a wonderful place, and I hope you get to visit someday, if for no other reason than the castles are feckin' spectacular. So
it's at the top of my list. We will go someday.
We'll go someday. It'll be amazing. And I will squee and be like, and that's my family's crest, and do all the things in Denmark that we got to do in Ireland with Aaron's family.
I made you do with my family.
I loved it though. It was super fun. I just have absolutely no genetic ties to the island of Ireland.
Emotional ties though.
Just tons. I'm Irish adjacent. They've adopted me. It's adorable. So
we bring you into the fold.
Anyway, so we'll see you next time to talk about something else. Dane.
Bye, everybody.